Welcome, everyone. It is Hump Day, and y'all are watching the H2G podcast. Today, we're talking about a little sensitive subject, something that hits a little close to home for everybody on the show. We want to talk about what everyone does coping with anxiety and depression. What activities that you do, how do you cope with your struggles? How do you cope with just getting away? We just want to know, is there anybody in your life that struggles with something? Because I know me personally, I've had people in my life go through things that I never knew they were going through. And I was shocked to find out that, they were going through something. I had to find out in the worst way possible. So, not exactly a jolly good Wednesday, but we wanted to jump off the comfort cliff today. And I wanted to start with Justin, man. So, what do you do to cope with, anxiety or depression, or, when you're struggling, when those things in your life just seem to just mount up on you? What do you do, man?
Oh man, that is a loaded question and a half.
It's pretty loaded.
Yeah. Depression and anxiety. So here's something I'd like to clear up, because I feel like, there's a stigma, or at least a social belief, that depression is either, some people actually literally believe it, that it's just a cope or a reach for attention or something like that. There's some people that truly believe that, that they actually believe your good days and you have bad days, but you just deal with it because that's life, and that's fine. If that's what makes you comfortable, that's what makes you comfortable. But depression itself, anybody can be hit with it. You don't have to be clinically diagnosed. You don't have to be, it's not some cop out that people are making for living life. It's a condition that people are suffering from, and it can happen to anyone. And it's probably happening to more people this year than it has ever happened before. I guarantee, we've talked about in the past, on this show, that quarantine is probably making life hell for a lot of people, because they've learned to live this routine where they're away from their family members, away from their significant others, and then they come back together and they can take each other in doses. Not that that's what the relationship is built on, but now that they're around each other 24/7, it's like the first time you moved in with someone. I used to say it all the time. You don't really know somebody until you try to be their roommate, because then you're around them all the time, and that's when you kind of learn the dynamics of that relationship, whether it be friendship, family, actual relationship, whatever you want to call it. What I do to cope with depression is literally identify it, understand that that's what's going on, that I am letting the negative outweigh the positive, that I am allowing myself to succumb to this. Not that it's that easy, not that you can avoid it, not that it's not normal, but I have to own the fact that I'm letting it win right now. I have to do something about it. And there's so many things that you can do. First and foremost, there's always someone to talk to, because you're not alone, and depression is all over. I mean, it literally can and will happen to almost everyone in some shape, form, or facet at some point in your life. It's life. But you don't have to deal with it alone. You don't have to just suck it up. Some people have that mentality. Just suck it up. You're not that depressed. There's nothing there's way worse things in the world. I've heard that before. Feel better. I've heard that a lot before. I hope you feel better. The mind is very tricky. It's very intricate. It takes down a lot of information and it stores it, and then it projects that back for you in the form of thought. And sometimes it just keeps projecting combinations of negative moments in your life, and it's so easy to lose that fight. So own it, own that that's what's going on, that you're letting life win and you're letting negative win, and then find the things that make you happy, find the things that bring you joy, prioritize those when it comes to your extracurriculars, and then when it comes to work or school or your day-to-day, find the parts that you're the best at and congratulate yourself for it and live in that and rejoice in that. You know, if you're a server and you love the closing portion of serving, when everybody's satisfied and had a great meal, push through all the negative things that are happening with your day, push through the cooks that are taking too long and the other server that's now called off so you have 2 extra tables, push through all that and get to that close, and then just enjoy that because you deserve it. You're dealing with all the negative, right? Find ways to reward yourself, identify it, and I know that you're not alone. I guess that would be my 3. And then as far as anxiety, that's just as tough, if not tougher. And I don't know. I wish I had a full answer to how to deal with anxiety, because I suffer from anxiety worse than anything else. People who try to drive me around know that. So I won't touch as much because I know I've been rolling for a little bit. But yeah, reach out to me. You can reach out to me if you're listening and you need someone. You can reach out to me.
I appreciate that, man, because I feel you completely. Feel better, or it's gonna be okay. Pick your head up. I completely get it. Richie, man.
Well, I'm not going to speak too much about this, but what I'll say is anxiety and depression. We'll go one at a time. I think the easiest thing, not that anxiety is easy to deal with and not that depression is easy to deal with, is I always first focus on identifying like what's causing it. Like, what am I thinking? What's leading to this? What's the thought pattern? Why is it like it's something I'm afraid of? Is it a concern? Trying to get control back is usually the fastest way for me to identify like what my anxiety is and how I can remove it. So trying to find control. So after I think about like where is the loss of control, because that's usually how my anxiety happens, then I just focus on like breathing, to be honest. Breathing's like the next step. If breathing doesn't work and I'm at home, then after that, I like to do like aromatherapy, whether it's like a candle or some sort of like scent. Oils also work. There's plenty of essential oils you can do. If that doesn't work, after I've gone through like the scents and trying to like relax myself, breathe, I'll go for like a walk, or I'll do, some light cardio or like light weights, something to just get my body moving so I can focus on something else. And if I'm still feeling like really shitty after that and I'm still like really anxious, then kind of just write my thoughts down. Because it's like, again, it's going back to step 1, it's like loss of control. So sometimes like writing down, what the loss of control is and, how I'm feeling about the emotion of it will help. But again, does this always work? Is this always my pattern? Absolutely not. But it's usually how I focus on my anxiety. I don't get it too often. Usually it's work related. So a lot of the things I just mentioned, I have to like pull back. Like aromatherapy is obviously not an option, but the other things are, and I'll breathe and I'll go for a walk when I'm at work because I do work on site, and then I'll write things down. So that's kind of how I focus on anxiety. Depression, that one's to me a little tougher personally, because that's like anxiety is what I would say more fleeting. It's definitely scary and just equally as scary, but usually it's something that passes a little quicker. Depression tends to be like a mental state and a state of mind in a period of time. And Justin hit a lot of the points. I'm trying not to go to it too much, but honestly, having a support network is the first and foremost most important thing. Marv kind of already mentioned it earlier. It's a lot of people, depression, mental health is such a stigma in society still, and it shouldn't be, but for a lot of people it is, and they don't like to talk to other people about it, even their friends. It sounds like Marvin does have a couple that he does talk to, but having a network is really helpful. You can't bottle things in. And honestly, therapist is super helpful too. Even if you have a network, having a therapist, like I'm telling you, having a third party who can really, for one, is an expert in the field and understands like your thought process as a person and a human being and etc. Like it baffles my mind sometimes when people try to handle things with like, oh, I don't need a therapist, as if that's like a bad thing or a weakness. Like, you're not an expert at depression. You're not an expert at being happy. People think they are, but they're not, because you don't critically look at yourself and identify what causes you happiness and things like that. I mean, sure, small level things like I love ice cream, sure. But what I mean is like on a whole, what fills your heart with joy, like at an emotional and like intellectual level, a lot of people don't go into that. So So like having a therapist and having someone to really identify that, the highs and the lows, is very helpful. I've only been to with a therapist one time, and it was about 9 months, but it was probably the most depressed I'd been. And I don't think I would have been able to pull out of it. And another example, and it's not something I really talk about a lot because it's not something to talk about. I'm an alcoholic and I went to AA. And going to AA is also critical too. And it's therapy in group session, so to speak. And more importantly, it's somebody who you can identify with, because sometimes you can have a therapist and they can acknowledge some of the toxic behavior you may have, but that therapist may not be, and they may not specialize in, abuse and honestly like addiction. So they may not be able to help you on that level. And if they've never experienced the addiction, they can only know like the book sense of it. And I'm telling you, as somebody who, has dealt with that, somebody who hasn't, trying to tell me what I need to do doesn't always gel. So like for me, I needed to go to AA. So the point being is there are different forms and different ways to help whatever's causing your depression. And it really does depend, but I always strongly first recommend a therapist. But having a network and reducing your stress, and again, that's more the anxiety stuff that I was talking about, the aromatherapy, writing things down, honestly, sleeping. Sleep, it's hard, but it's very important to sleep enough, right? Because sometimes you feel like you can't, but like that's super important. And getting a routine, sometimes like turning off your computer an hour before bed and your phone and things like that. You need to sleep when you're depressed because it usually compounds. You start thinking worse and you're not sleeping, and then you're thinking about it. You need to sleep. It's super important. Make sure you're eating well. I think that's another thing. Our diet usually goes to crap when our mental health goes to crap. So you really want to be eating well. And honestly, I'd say this is the hardest thing, and I think most people deal with this too, is negative thoughts. That's like usually how depression starts, and that's usually how it compounds. But like there's a lot of CBT therapy, but I'm not going to get into that. Basically, what I would say is if you're not going to seek a therapist and you're still struggling with negative thought, the best approach is like self-help books. Like you can have your circle, but I'm telling you, until you yourself overcome and understand your own bullshit, you're never going to beat your depression. So stopping negative thoughts is like truthfully needs to come from some advice, not from yourself, out of your own body. So if your friends aren't helping you and when I say not helping is in their advice does not help you succeed, then you need to move outward. Self-help books are very helpful for that. Therapists are very helpful for that. And then what I would say is procrastination. I would say a lot of the times when we get depressed, we stop doing things, and that just amplifies like our mood, right? Because not only are we not feeling well, now we're not doing the things we would normally do, which kind of leads into like, your household chores. Make sure you're staying on top of it, because it's like, oh, my house is getting really crappy. I'm not cooking. I'm not eating well. All the things I already mentioned. Your procrastination will be like compound your depression, and it's going to fatigue you, and it's going to make you feel crappy. So like establish, short-term goals. Like I'm going to make sure I'm doing the dishes. I'm going to make sure I'm cooking my meals. And then I would say the last thing, and this is actually from my engineering teacher years ago, he called it a toolbox. So I'm going to call this like a wellness toolbox. But basically it's things that are going to help you feel better, even for a moment. So for instance, like Tyrion, like petting your cat, cuddling your cat, listening to music, taking a warm bath, something you enjoy doing if it's like a sport, something, a physical activity, whatever makes you happy. Ice cream, like I mentioned earlier, whatever makes you happy for a small period of time. You need to have that wellness toolbox for when the other things aren't working. You can kind of dip into that, and then you can get the motivation, you can feel a little better, and you can focus on, like I was discussing, not procrastinating and trying to stay away from negative thoughts and having good habits, whether it's sleeping, eating, staying away from stress and things like that. So, I mean, those are just like things that I personally do. But it's hard for me to talk about this because it's like, we each have our own demons and we each have our own doors we have to get through. And what my successes or my failures don't necessarily apply in good or bad to you. But I think that's the way I try to handle stress, and that's the way I try to handle depression.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Richie. And I love that you touched on having a wellness toolbox, because it really takes a lot of courage and self-reflection and curbing one's pride to say, I need some help. So I completely get it. Christy, how about you?
Richie really covered a lot of stuff there. He is a wealth of information. If you ever need anything from Richie, he will be there. if you need to talk to him, he is in my toolbox. I love him so much. He listens. You just need one of those people in your toolbox.
H2G support group.
Yes, he is one of my people. But as we talked yesterday, one of my tools is going on a walk, getting out of my environment, because when you're just around the things that are making you depressed, because I've suffered with depression for a lot, like many, many years. And then getting pregnant made me have anxiety about getting depression again. So with one of my tools being walking, and after giving birth, you can't walk for like 6 weeks. So I was freaking out. I'm like, I'm more prone to getting the baby blues, which is like you get depression after you have a baby. So not being able to use my main tool after I might get baby blues, like that made me so anxious. So I use my other tools in my toolbox and I listen to a book. I don't have to leave my bed. I can just listen to my book. It's called Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. It has no point to it, but she also suffers from depression and a whole slew of other issues. And if that book can't make you laugh, or if you can't relate to it when you're depressed, then I don't know what you can relate to. She talks about sloths and kangaroos, and she's just hilarious. But she also talks about you have a supply of spoons. That is what gets you through the day. So you spend a spoon getting up and out of bed, and you spend a spoon to go make yourself breakfast. So sometimes when you're depressed, you don't get as many spoons that day. So you have to spend them very cautiously. So I'm gonna use 3 spoons to get out of bed when I'm depressed. And this kid, I'm sorry, she's making a lot of noise. But just that book and just cuddling with my dog, and but also like Richie said, what works for me is not necessarily what's gonna work for you. So just figure out what works for you and do it.
Yeah,
and Marvel movies. That's also another one. Marvel movies.
Hey, you can't. I know you can't live without those. I know a couple of about what you couldn't live without, and I know Marvel movies is one of them. But a point be made. I mean, yeah, you're right, Christy. Like, it's finding something to like kind of bring some joy out of you when you're really feeling low. You know, like anything that make you laugh. I'll touch on that a little later. But that I found that to kind of be the best medicine when you're depressed, is finding, whether it's a book or movie, show, anything, to find something to get you to smile. And you never know what it could do for your mood. And last but not least, Chelsea. I know a couple of days ago you said you couldn't live without pen and paper. So I had a question. Is writing is something you like to do when you're, coping with, depression, anxiety, anything that may be mounting up on you?
Yeah. So I've had issues with anxiety and depression since high school. And I think back then it was almost harder because I didn't really know what it was. Like, you're not familiar with stuff. And even back then it wasn't as common to talk about. So I didn't fully understand what I was going through, but I've always been very creative and artsy. And, I was finding ways to try and figure out how to cope with it. And writing is really what I use. Like my writing, my poetry is really, it uses a lot of metaphors. And that's like how I work through my emotions and what I'm feeling and why, because a lot of times I won't know that right offhand. And I just kind of really have to self-reflect on what it is that I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. So a lot of my writing is probably pretty depressing. But, I do want to publish that book because I feel like going through that since high school, I felt very alone. I felt very misunderstood. I didn't feel like I could talk to people about it. I felt like I was a burden to people. So for me, I always coped with it kind of by myself, which is why I went to writing and helped kind of like work through everything that I was feeling. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that that's not at all true. And I want other people to realize that they are not alone in feeling the way that they feel. Because like literally just about everything in life, no feeling, even depression that goes on for months on end, it's not permanent. It does go away. There are ways to get through it. Happiness is also not permanent. I know a lot of people get so obsessed with trying to find happiness, and happiness, like every other emotion, is not permanent. And you need to find peace with not always being happy, which is probably what I struggled with the most. I was like, this doesn't make me happy. This doesn't make me happy. That's not about that. Like, cherish the times when you are happy, and keep in mind that you wouldn't know the importance or the profoundness of that happiness if you did not have times of your life that you were not happy. But I think the most important thing is to figure out what works for you. If you have to be on medication for depression, or you have to go to a therapist to work through your depression, there's literally nothing to be ashamed of for that. If you have to talk to friends or family about it, there's no reason to be ashamed of that. And again, like plugging my thing for 2021 is vulnerability. I've always kind of like shut down and kept it to myself, and I'm no longer doing that. So I'm going to publish all of my poetry that people have never read. I'm going to tell people I'm not fine when I'm not fine instead of saying I'm fine. I think we all should be able to be more open about these types of things, because I think, especially after this year, as Justin said, people are probably feeling it more being stuck in quarantine. So join me in jumping off your comfort cliff.
Well, I told you last week you might have to shove me off the cliff, because I think all of you are braver than I am, and I appreciate all of you sharing that. Y'all just jumped off a comfort cliff, and I'm honestly struggling with that. Like you said, Chelsea, like that's something, that we all, struggle, that state of mind, like struggling with wanting to attain happiness. Like this is this destination, and that's been my problem. One, not knowing when things are really bad, when I'm feeling depressed, that things can get better. For me, like I said earlier, when I'm feeling depressed, when I'm really feeling low, even though it's really hard, I like to watch, I like to watch a stand-up. I like to watch a stand-up special. I like to just listen to a comedian and see if he can relate to what I'm going through. Usually what I'm going through, he can turn that into a joke, and the world seems so dark. And having a support structure, I've noticed that when I've felt worse, I can reach out to a few guys on here and just talk about it, even if it's talking about it briefly, just to get it off your chest, because there's nothing worse than holding something inside. And I've been guilty of that many times, and I still do. It's one thing to have courage and to be prideful at the same time. And courage is stepping out of yourself and be able to say, this is what I'm going through. I'm not having a good day. Everybody goes through this every day. Someone asks you, how's your day going? And sometimes I honestly want to tell them, like, do you really want to know? Because it's not going well. And that's just something everybody goes through. For me, recently I have found that prayer helps me center myself. It helps me ground me, helps me in that, this mindset I'm in, it's not fight this, and my faith can get me out of this. And there's times I've lived that. And on the flip side of that, I feel completely what you're saying, Chelsea. Writing is kind of an outlet for me. Even though I don't sit and write for hours, I will simply just journal like what happened throughout the day, and then kind of look at it and see, like, make an analysis. Or I'll be like, okay, I can take this day, and this is not going to be my tomorrow. This is not going to be my future. This just happened today. I'm going to leave it where it is. I can try to let it go. Easier said than done, I already know. So with my career with acting, that kind of gives me that platform and that setting to escape. I know, Justin, you might feel the same way. Whatever it was that you were going through in life, being on set and being around your castmates, being around what you love to do, your passion, which I hope all of you do out there. Whatever you're passionate in, surround yourself with it. Surround yourself with people that love what you do, and surround yourself with people that are going to support you, loving what you do. And I found that kind of just takes me away from those dark thoughts. And anxiety is really tough, because in New York City is so many people. There's so much going on. There's so much compounded with your thinking that it's hard to kind of break away from all the hustle and bustle and find. And so it's tough. I haven't handled anxiety the best way. It's hard to really be honest about what you do to, cope with that, because everybody's got the methods, but I'll honestly say on, this podcast that I have not handled it right throughout the years, and I'm still trying to find that way. And that's tough for everyone. So I would say to anyone that's watching the show, to, make sure you have a network around you, like Richie said. There's no reason why you should sit and think that this situation, this state of mind is going to be permanent.
That's something that you could go and try that's new, is acting, because if you get into a character, if you can or D&D, as much as you guys like to joke about that, like anything where you can play improv would be another one. Any kind of acting. It doesn't even have to be in a show in front of people. Just go to an acting class or go to an improv, because you have to, in order to do that, you have to release yourself. Like any good acting teacher is going to tell you to leave Marvin, Chelsea, Richie, and Christy at the door and be open to whatever. Like improv, the number one rule is never say no. Like always say yes and just go with it and roll with it. That is a really great outlet, because it probably doesn't have to, like I play villains primarily or serious roles, because I go all the way there and, vet out my emotions that way. But not everybody has to do all that. It's dangerous.
One of the things when I was younger that I used to focus on it's called the ladder of success. It's the idea of you have to be doing a certain thing in a certain way to be successful. And I learned very quickly, sometimes the ladder is on the wrong building. So you gotta, but it takes time and perspective to get to that point. So I was going to kind of talk about that. And there's something else I was going to talk about. It doesn't matter. So.
It does matter, Richie.
I was going to say it does matter.
I like that you're keeping the record on.
It matters, man.
We got B-sides.
Yeah, if we're all adding more to it, I think the other thing too that I had to get used to, I used to try and bottle everything up. Like I didn't want to feel it, or I was ashamed to feel it. I didn't want to cry. I don't like being an emotional person, and I needed to realize that having emotions is part of being human. And so now I force myself to feel it. I need to process that emotion and feel it. And sometimes that means I have to write my way through it and figure out why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. But, and obviously there's a time and a place for sitting at work. Maybe don't go through those emotions right then. But at some point you shouldn't be bottling it up. You need to take the time to process them and feel them and let them ride their wave through and then be done with it. So, yeah.
All right. It can be tough, Chelsea. You got to give yourself time to heal. I know we were talking last week, and I know all of you've gone through this, dealing with the death of a loved one. That's one of the hardest things in life to endure, is losing a friend, losing a relative, losing a pet even. But finding healing and not stuck in that rut, that's the most important thing, because that you can truly alienate the people around you if you just stay stuck in it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you all for watching and listening to today's show. All of you on this panel. I wanted to say it's tough dealing with this. I know we said this would be a jolly good Wednesday. Just want to tell you all that you're not alone. That's my final thought. talk today. As you can clearly see from me, and still assign someone. Thank you all for allowing me to have this platform so we can talk about this. But it's man, thank you all for being brave. Thank you. Thank you.